One of the biggest things that I hope the customer always remembers is that we care. We care about what they do. We care about their mission. We want them to make that mission just like they do.
Hi, I'm Rick Whittle with BreakingDefense.com at the Association of the United States Army's annual convention in Washington. And I'm here now to talk to Bill Fell, who is a test pilot for Sikorsky, a Lockheed Martin company, who flies actually a couple of helicopters that are kind of in a series of Russian nesting doll designs that Sikorsky has come up with in recent years. One called the technology demonstrator was the X2, and then Sikorsky has built another aircraft called the S-97 Raider. The Sikorsky, working with Boeing, has come up with yet another helicopter with similar technology called the SB-1 Defiant. But right now, we're here to talk about the newest nesting doll, the Raider-X, which is Sikorsky's entry in the Army's priority helicopter program, the Future Armed Reconnaissance Aircraft Program, or known as FARA. And Bill, how about telling me about, this is the model of the Raider-X. Tell me about the aircraft and the similarities and the differences between the S-97, which you've been flying.
Right, so there are more similarities than differences. That this is about a 20% upscaled version of the Raider. So it's just a little bit bigger than the Raider, the aircraft that we've been flying for several years in West Palm Beach and that we're continuing to collect data on. And so we have a little bit bigger rotor system on the Raider-X, then that will account for the additional payload and range requirements that the Army's put in for the FARA competition.
Well, while we're talking about the rotor, explain this rotor, because it's a coaxial rotor, one on top of the other, which is the same, I think, right, as the X2 and as the S-97.
So the X2 technology rotors are rigid counter-rotating rotors, and the benefit of that is as you go faster, you can rely on the lift on the advancing half of the disc. And so each rotor has an advancing half and a retreating half. And so you balance the lift forces between those two advancing halves of the rotors. Now the benefit of that is, like on a single main rotor aircraft or even an articulated coaxial rotor system, you have to balance the forces between the individual rotors. We have an imbalance on each rotor, but we take the good lift from the advancing half, and thereby we don't have retreating blade stall concerns. Eventually, you go fast enough in a helicopter where that retreating blade can't produce enough lift, and you run into this physics wall called retreating blade stall, where you just can't go any faster.
Which is what this helicopter and the others in this series are meant to overcome, right? To the limit on speed on conventional helicopters.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And we've gone over 250 knots in level flight on the X2 demonstrator, and we've gone 207 knots in level flight on Raider, and 215 in a shallow dive on Raider, and over 260 on the X2 demonstrator. And so speed is roughly double, or X2 times 2, what a normal helicopter flies at.
What do you expect this Raider-X to reach in top speed and level flight?
So the Army requirement is to go 180 knots and dash to 205 knots, and we'll absolutely meet that requirement with the ITE engine that we have. As we add more power, as that engine capability grows, for us, we're able to put all of that extra power to the pusher prop, and we'll expand the speed envelope of the aircraft even more.
Well, and let's talk about that pusher prop back here, because it isn't just these coaxial rotors that allow you to go so fast, right? It's this propeller in the back.
True enough. As you start to go fast, again, the benefit of the advancing blade concept is you're using very little power to have to go to the main rotor. In high-speed flight, roughly 90% of the power is going to the pusher prop to go fast, and the main rotor is only consuming about 10% of your power. So as you add more power, you're adding more speed capability because that goes to the pusher prop to allow you to go fast.
If I understand it correctly, the thing about these stiff blades is that they create a lot of vibration, and that's been one of the challenges in developing this kind of aircraft. How is Sikorsky meeting that challenge?
So we have tools to account for aircraft vibration. We have an active vibration control system, and it's kind of like the noise canceling headsets, that it's putting out an opposite frequency to the frequency of vibration that's coming in from the rotor. You have a mass that counters that and nullifies the vibration coming into the system. So
this is built into the fuselage?
That's right. You have it at various places. You put these force generators throughout the aircraft in order to limit or eliminate the vibration that's coming in from the rotor system. And that's one of the tools. The blade design itself is another tool. And so we recently have started flying a second generation rotor blade design on the S-97 Raider, and the design of that rotor blade was in part to reduce vibrations, and it's performing as we expected, and we're going to be out to maximum speed with those blades likely next week.
Now, looking at this fuselage, you have a side-by-side pilot setup. One of your competitors has a tandem with two pilots, one behind the other, and you and others in the competition have decided to go side-by-side. Why? What are the advantages of that?
So for one, the Army is looking for a very large weapons payload for some munitions or launches that they're not quite sure how big it's going to be, so they're trying to get a very large volume. And so side-by-side facilitates putting that large volume back there. But I've flown both tandem and side-by-side aircraft, and if you and I are side-by-side like this, and we're flying this aircraft, and you're busy doing a task, and I need you to be quiet on the radio, or I need you to do something, or I need to get your attention, I can grab you by the shoulder, I can put a hand in front of your face, and you can't really do that in a tandem aircraft. In the tandem, you have a mirror where you're looking back at the guy, and you can maybe try and get their attention, but we think that the side-by-side adds to that crew coordination, that you're a more cohesive crew by virtue of the configuration of the aircraft.
Now, you have a simulator here, a flight simulator, to show people what it looks like to be inside that future aircraft, right?
Yes, we do. We have a flight simulator. That simulator includes motion, and it's not just a toy. It includes the actual software that we're flying in the aircraft. So as we mature our software, our flight control software, it's fly-by-wire, that we fly that in simulation to develop it. We fly it in the aircraft. We see what we like and what we don't like, and we make changes, and we roll out the next version. And so we will be several versions of software. In essence, version 15 of the Raider software will be version 1 of the Raider-X software, and so it'll have a high level of maturity and refinement on flight 1 for Raider-X.
So we talked about the propeller, the pusher propeller a little bit. Tell me about the tail here. It doesn't look like a conventional helicopter tail.
No, so the tail has elevators and rudders on it. And the way this aircraft works, you don't have the losses of a tail rotor back there. You have yaw control through these two main rotors. You put a difference in torque between the upper and the lower rotor, and that provides a yaw moment in low-speed flight. In high-speed flight,
in other words, you don't need a tail rotor to keep from going sideways.
That's right, and you can fly sideways at 30, 40, 50 knots and still be able to turn and point the direction you need to turn through differential torque between the upper and lower rotors. Now, as you go to high-speed flight, we have the flight controls automatically phase out that difference between the two rotors, and we have rudders back here that are electrically actuated and provide turn coordination, side slip control, and all those sorts of things. Now, the interesting piece, though, is if the pilot wants the nose to turn left, he steps on the left pedal. If he wants the nose to turn right, he steps on the right pedal. And he doesn't need to know what the physical mechanism, whether it's a difference in torque between the two rotors or whether it's the rudders back here that are doing that.
And is this a stabilizer, like on a...
So it's an elevator, and it provides pitch control. The interesting thing is that these two rotors have all of the pitch authority and pitch control power that you need to fly the aircraft. The elevators are there more for reducing the loads on the main rotor so that we can take weight out of the main rotor system.
Can we go inside and sit side by side and let you show me how it works?
Absolutely. My colleague Christian's in there now. He's all warmed up and ready to take you for a ride.
Great, thanks. Bill Fell had to leave, but his fellow pilot here, Christian Corey, has agreed to show us the Raider-X simulator, and we're going to climb into the seats now and see what it looks like to fly that thing.
So it's my pleasure to show you Raider-X, and what we're flying here is actually a model of flight generated test data. Yeah, that'll kind of cinch up on you here, but hopefully not as bad as before.
You don't need one?
So it's shh, don't tell them. So it's test generated data that we use to really to validate and verify the models that we're building and developing that will ultimately go into the machine. So what you are sitting in is a representative kind of motion. I guess it gives you the stimulation as though we're moving. So hopefully as I accelerate the machine, you should feel those straps kind of pulling you back in the seat. And I would tell you that's what makes flying the Raider and the X2 technology different than a normal helicopter when I fly it, is that when I engage that prop and I ask it to propulse me forward, I get this visceral feeling that I'm being pulled back in my seat. And if we were to do this just on the visual system, you don't really get that sense. So what the team here has tried to do is to develop a system that gives you that intuitive feel of, hey, I'm kind of rolling and I feel the vibrations and I feel the fact that we're accelerating and decelerating. And so that tries to just bring a little bit of realism into the simulation environment.
Not quite a rocket sled, but a lot faster than a Huey.
Oh, it's certainly faster than Huey, and someday maybe we'll get to the rocket sled, but I would have to concede that we have yet to hit rocket sled speeds. But like I said, the key of it is that this propeller, I can engage that just the same way I would on an airplane, and as we get going faster, the airspeed is going to accelerate in a pretty profound way, and then at the end of it, we'll have gone from helicopter flying to more airplane flying.
Would it make sense? Would it be realistic? Or could you put us in a hover and then go from a standing start?
I absolutely could, yep. And let me show you that hover. This is an interesting feature that we have, is we can use that prop both positively and negatively. So from 135 knots, I'm going to just back up into that hover here. So I'm going to push full negative prop, and I'm now at 100 knots, and in a couple blinks of an eye, I'll be back in that hover. And so there's 80 knots, and 70 knots, and 60 knots.
Without having to...
Without ever pitching the nose up. No, we've maintained this level attitude here the entire time. So I've never lost sight of the area in which I want to try to land. So here we come back to 25 knots, and the machine's going to bring us onto this nice hover, and then from there...
And what's our altitude?
Right now we're at about 100 feet, 110 feet. And we're coming into the hover, and then you asked to see how quick we could get going. So I guess we'll do a bit of a drag race here. So
see if it's like a Tesla.
All right. So here we go. I'll do kind of a combination of a helicopter takeoff, and I'll use the prop. So you feel kind of in the lumbar of your back. That seat starts to push you forward. And that's about the feeling that you get in the machine is this push forward. When the speed starts to come alive, that airflow over the fuselage starts to hit the prop, and that prop actually becomes more effective. And at the point that it does, I'll just slowly rotate the nose up to level, and then I'll watch the airspeed increase. There's 100 knots, and it'll drive its way up towards 180, 200 knots. And now I'm flying it much more like an airplane. The collective is something that I don't really think about anymore. The system automates the collective to try to maximize the lift out of the main rotor blades and minimize the drag. So all the main rotor's doing now is providing lift. They're the wings, and the propeller's doing all the thrusting. So that's what's giving us speed.
Where is your control for the propeller? And
super question. It's right on the cyclic, and it's just a little rotator knob. I push it forward to go faster, and I pull it back to go slower. And so in that sense, I think it's a pretty intuitive control that is on my collective hand. It absolutely is a thumb throttle. I'm going to use that term from now on. I've been looking for the right word, thumb throttle. Yes. So that's sort of the magic of forward flight. And then as far as the maneuverability in forward flight goes, we have kind of a dual moded system. I have what we call a rate command attitude hold system, but I can make inputs, and the machine will faithfully hold attitudes as I put them in. Or I can ask for more stability from the system, and so with the flip of a switch, it'll always bring me to wings level, and it'll always hold an airspeed. And I can vary that airspeed through piloted command. But if I was to suddenly fly into the clouds, I can be in a bank angle, and decide that I feel disoriented, and I can just let go of the machine, and as I sit here and talk to you, it'll do what it needs to do to bring us back to a level attitude and keep us out of harm's way.
Right?
It is probably the most important thing in the clouds. Yeah, next to just staying aloft right side up is number two. So.
So, on a what in an Army mission would this speed get you?
Gosh, it gets you a bunch of things, right? I mean, speed is really kind of survivability. When it comes to threats, it's the ability to remain out of the detection area of a threat, but if you are detected, it allows you to use the systems that are traditionally employed to defeat those threats and to really get away from where the threat is. I think that the fundamental drawback of a helicopter is that it tends to displace laterally pretty slow relative to like a jet aircraft, right? So we tend to use a lot of the same tactics, I think, that a jet uses, but less effectively because we can't move as quickly. We can't displace. So if you can imagine a guy hunting geese, it's all about that track crossing angle and how much you lead them. Well, the faster those geese are going, the harder it is to anticipate. So maneuverability and speed are really the things that are gonna prove useful. Yeah. But speed in getting to the objective. If it's troops that you're trying to support somewhere, the faster you get to them, the faster you respond to their need, right? So. And then that holds true if you're like a CASEVAC kind of a role, right? They talked a lot, you heard in the Gulf, in OIF, OEF, about the golden hour. And if somebody was wounded on the battlefield, if you could get them to critical care within an hour, like their chances of living was like quite a bit higher. Right. And so really speed there is critical as well. So it lets the force be further back from the front lines, but you can traverse the distance between the base and the activity much quicker.
So this simulator, the motion is quite realistic.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. The guys in the back will be glad to hear that too.
No, it's really fun. What else can you show? Can you show me going through an urban area?
I haven't got urban areas. Let me try and zorch over here to some mountain areas. So the other thing you're going to see this thing be able to do is because of the rigid rotor system, we're able to handle higher positive and negative G's than a traditional helicopter. Negative G's is traditionally something that a helicopter kind of steers clear of. It causes potentially bad things to happen up the main rotor system. We're able to, because of the way the rotors are rigidly mounted to the rotor head, we're able to find ourselves avoiding terrain and maintaining a terrain flight profile probably a little bit better than a traditional helicopter because we're not afraid to unload the rotor, and we can also use that propulsor to increase speed in the climb and decrease speed in the descent. So
give us some gas now because we've only got a couple minutes
I know what I'm doing. I should have paid more attention when we were flying, but I got wrapped up in talking about other things. But to me, it's noteworthy that I've spent this entire flight looking at you, and every now and again out the corner of my eye have yet to excite us.
Well, I'm a great co-pilot.
Well, there is that. All right, here we go. We'll get down into some ground clutter. So I haven't really done anything with my left hand, which in a traditional helicopter would have been.
Can this demonstrate the agility of the aircraft? Because that's something that
let me
Sikorsky has been touting.
Let me see if I can put it into the agile mode. And so, like, here's this little bit of terrain, which is always fun to play around with. Now, what's really unfortunate is for everyone in the back of the simulator that it wraps around. Like it'll make you feel like you want to fall over as I maneuver this thing through the canyon. So sort of viewers beware. But for us, it's a fine immersive environment. So let me just pop up over this little ridge here, and then I can hug the terrain and I can get back down into the ground clutter.
Wow.
And you get a better ride than I do because as you said, you've got the full benefit of the seat belts and that being put on, but it's quite a bit different feel in a simulator that lets you know that you are maneuvering. But I talked about that stability mode, so I can be in this hard right hand turn here, and then I can upshift to the stability mode, and the machine will right us and bring us out, and then I can get back to just talking to you and I don't think the Army's going to have time to sit and talk to their co-pilots, but there's a plethora of things that they'd be doing trying to manage the mission and internal and external fires and you name it. So
And is this the actual width of the Raider-X cockpit?
It is not this
pretty
wide.
roomy.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, the office space will not be quite this wide, but I think it's going to be. I think it's going to feel right for the mission. Let me say that, right?
Thanks.
You're welcome.